Previously, we had taken one of these mountain graphics and converted it into a height map utilizing selection, gradients, and smudging and smearing tools, a little bit of painting and erasing. Another way that we could go about this would be to utilize some of the options like shearing, perspective, 3D transform of a specific area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my free select, just grab the lasso tool and generally get this area selected of another one of the simpler graphics. Once I've got that selected, there's a few options up here where you would go if you wanted to rotate or scale. For example, if we shear, we can do some things like this that are pretty cool. Let's Control Z on that actually. And another example would be if I wanted to do like a perspective, and this one's great because you can literally if you want to change the angle that's something is going at, it's pretty handy, pretty intuitive. Again, I'm going to Control Z on this case, and before I do actually do the next option, I'm going to just grab my paintbrush and let's just shrink that down a little bit. And I want to lighten up some of the areas in the higher part of these two mountains. All right, so that done. Anyway, if I go to the 3D transform, this one is really great because I can literally flip this around on multiple axes and get whatever effect I want. In this case, what I would probably want to do is actually use the X, and I can just specifically say which axes I want to flip this on. And then go ahead and transform, and I get it sort of from a top-down view at a little bit of an angle. And then what I can do is I'll just grab this and move it down a little bit. And then for safekeeping, what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to do a Control-C to copy this. But then this layer that has been created, I'm actually going to grab this, I'll right-click, and rather than anchoring the layer, I'm going to say that I want it to a new layer. And there it is. So for the moment, I'm going to hide that. And I've got this area to work with. Let's just select all. Oh, make sure that I'm on the correct layer, the land layer, and then we'll select all. And using some of the things I had done before, let's use the gradient tool. Before I do that, though, let's mimic a little bit, make this mimic a little bit more of what the base of the mountain might look like. So I'm going to grab my eraser tool. We should be fine there because it's erasing the transparency. And we'll just kind of widen that out here. And in this area, we'll sort of widen that out as well, sort of mimicking the idea of there being two separate masses that are converging on one another. And I'll go ahead and I'll use the gradient tools now. So if we go back to my paint buckets, select gradients, I'll stick with foreground to background RGB. I can change it right here if I need to. And I think in this case, I'm going to stick with the square shape. And I'll go ahead and move that around a little bit. I'm not going to get too fancy or try to be too precise because I'm going to actually be moving this soon enough. Something like that should be fine for the moment. And I will go ahead and move that over a touch more, actually. I'll go ahead and hit enter. And then maybe I'll do the same thing right here as well. So I'll just put one of these in here. And we'll hit enter on that as well. So I've kind of got these two pyramid shapes that are side by side. But the nice thing is I can go ahead and, well, before I do anything, I'll actually use my smudging to muddy up those areas a little bit. And the other one I might actually tend towards is using the blur sharpen tool to blur the edges of that pyramidal structure. I don't want those to be too light, because when we convert those into a height map, those will show up as being higher elevations. But now what I do is, I think what I'm going to do is I will go ahead and I will paste this into place. So let's just do a Control V. Now it showed up somewhere, not where I wanted. So let's just zoom out. I'm assuming that it is showing up in the central portion of what I've done. There it is. So let's just go ahead and we'll grab that, move it up to where we were working, go back to my magnifying glass, and kind of use that as an overlay. Let's hold on the control button and minus that. I zoomed in too much on that area. All right, with that generally selected, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move it a bit so that it sort of lines up with what I have. I'm going to make it a little bit more transparent. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to anchor this. All right, so that's now part of the lower layer. I've created a little bit of a mess, but using the same things I've done, I've sort of got something that mimics the shape of this, and I can sort of use that to inform what I'm doing as I go ahead and use my blurring, sharpening, smudging tools to make this a little bit more like what we want. I'm just going to hold that down, move that around, trying to keep that as a high spot. These areas are too dark now, so I'm going to go ahead and blur that. This is kind of nice because I've got a sense of, okay, there's a high spot here in theory. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try to maintain that. And if I can't, not a big deal. Maybe I'll work this over this way, smudging it. And then work some of this down so that that ends up, in essence, becoming a high spot. So there's a lot to do here. I've created a little bit of a mess. But in essence, it's kind of using the same technique that I used. Let's undo that. Except this time I'm actually using the graphics as a specific reference that I'm kind of working into this underlying gradient that I put into place. So I'm going to go around and I'm going to kind of alternate between those two different techniques that I was starting to utilize, and we'll see where that gets us.